Have you ever wondered what secrets still linger beneath the jungles of the ancient Maya? Welcome to Unearthed Secrets, where the temples whisper and forgotten kings still dream. From jade masks to cosmic observatories, each artifact holds a fragment of a vanished world. Before we begin, please like, subscribe, and share where you're watching from tonight. The Jade Death Mask of Pakal. Deep in the southern jungles of Mexico, where ceiba trees rise like pillars into a green eternity, the ruins of Palenque sleep beneath the weight of centuries, mists drift through the leaves like forgotten dreams, and somewhere beneath that endless canopy lies a tomb unlike any other, the resting place of a king whose face was reborn in jade. It is said that when the temple walls of Palenque catch the morning sun, a strange light lingers on their carvings, as if the stone itself remembers him. They called him Kinich Janabi Pakal, radiant sunshield, ruler of Palenque for nearly 70 years, but the name most people remember him by is simple: Pakal the Great. He was no myth, no imagined hero of legend. He lived, ruled, and died in a time when the Maya had reached the height of their power. And yet the story of his burial, and the object found upon his face, would become one of the greatest archaeological revelations of the 20th century. When archaeologist Alberto Ruz Luhier descended into the Temple of the Inscriptions in 1952, the air was so thick and stale, it felt like stepping into the lungs of the earth. For over 1,000 years, no human had walked those steps. The passage was narrow, the walls carved with strange symbols, and at the end lay a stone sarcophagus, immense and silent. Rees would later write that when the lid was lifted, the torchlight caught something that shimmered softly, not gold but something greener, deeper, alive. It was a mask, smooth, cold, perfect. The face of a man rendered in jade mosaic, the eyes made of shell and obsidian, seemed almost aware, as if the man beneath had only just closed them. The Jade Death Mask of Pakal. To the Maya, jade was not a simple ornament, it was the stone of life, green like growing maize, eternal like the forest, pure like the breath of the gods. To cover a dead ruler's face in jade was not to honor him with beauty, but to give him a second life. The Maya believed that breath and spirit were bound to the color green. They called it yax, a word that also meant fresh, sacred. First, to die with jade upon one's lips was to promise rebirth. To be covered in jade entirely, that was to transcend mortality itself. The mask's creation was no simple craft. Each tiny tile, over 200 of them, was cut from translucent jade, then fitted together like a puzzle, so seamless it seemed alive. The pieces were curved to the shape of Pakal's face, showing every line of his nose, every soft rise of his lips. Whoever made it had known him, or at least, had known how to make stone breathe. When the mask was lifted from his skull, time itself seemed to pause. Beneath it, his bones had turned to powder, his body fragile as dust, but his face, the image of the king, remained untouched, eternally serene. Archaeologists discovered that his entire tomb was a masterpiece of engineering. The sarcophagus lid was carved with a scene so intricate, it took decades to interpret. At its center, Pakal appears to fall backward into the mouth of the underworld, or perhaps to rise from it, framed by the world tree, the axis of Maya cosmology. His soul ascends through the heavens, or descends to the depths, depending on how you look. It is both a death and a rebirth. And around him carved serpents spiral like veins of the cosmos curling between stars and earth. To the Maya, serpents were not symbols of evil, they were the conduits between worlds, creatures that could move between sky, land, and the underworld. Through them, the king would journey beyond the bounds of life. But perhaps what captures the imagination most is not the art, nor the carvings, nor even the mask itself, but what the Maya believed it did. The jade mask was not merely a likeness, it was a vessel. In Maya funerary tradition, the mask was believed to preserve the breath of the deceased. When the soul departed, it would need to find its face again in the next world. The mask became the bridge between flesh and eternity. Through it, the spirit could speak, see, and remember. Imagine that, a civilization that believed a human soul could be caught, preserved, and guided home through a face of stone. Even now, standing before the mask in the museum in Mexico City, it is difficult not to feel something shift inside you. The green mosaic glimmers faintly under the light, and you sense almost irrationally that it knows you are there, that behind those obsidian eyes lies not emptiness, but waiting. Scholars have debated the exact purpose of Pakal's mask for decades. Was it simply an object of royal ceremony, a funerary gift, or something deeper, a symbolic tool designed to reunite the king's body and spirit across the cosmic divide? The Maya left no written explanation, but their carvings whisper enough. On the walls of the tomb, hieroglyphs speak of rebirth, sky, and maze. The king's sarcophagus was aligned precisely with the movements of Venus and the sun. When the first light of dawn touched the top of the temple each solstice, it shone directly through the chamber above the tomb. It was as though Pakal's soul itself was meant to rise with the sun, reborn through the mask that carried his breath. It's a breathtaking idea that an object could hold not only the image of a man, but his path to eternity, and perhaps that's why, when one gazes upon the mask, there is a quiet unease beneath the awe. It's not only beautiful, it feels alive. There's something intimate in its construction. The small imperfections where one jade tile is slightly lighter than the next, the faint asymmetry of the lips, details that feel human, not divine. You can almost imagine the artisan's trembling hand, placing each fragment with reverence, whispering prayers for the king's safe passage into the other world. And yet, some say the mask hides more than it reveals. There are those who see in it not rebirth, but a message. The intricate inlays form subtle patterns, mathematical alignments that correspond to the Mayan calendar's sacred cycles. When overlaid with the carvings on the sarcophagus lid, they form a strange harmony, as if mask and tomb were designed to be read together, like pages of a cosmic text. Others, more mystically inclined, claim the mask was never meant to stay buried. They believe Pakal's tomb was a ritual chamber, a kind of time capsule, meant to be opened in an age far beyond his own. In that sense they say it worked, because when Ruse uncovered it in 1952, humanity saw not just an artifact, but a mirror of something deeply familiar. The mask's quiet gaze reflects not only Pakal's face, but our own yearning for eternity, the same desire to be remembered, to transcend the boundaries of time. In the humid stillness of the jungle, you can still feel it, that longing, that echo of the man beneath the mask. The roots twist through stone, but they do not break it. The temples crumble, but they do not vanish. The jade glows unchanged, and somewhere perhaps the spirit of Pakal, the radiant sun shield, walks through the night sky, wearing the face his people gave him. If you listen long enough to the wind that drifts through Palenque's ruins, you might almost hear him breathe. Night settles softly over Palenque. The jungle hums its ancient lullaby, a low chorus of frogs, cicadas, and the rustle of unseen wings. The ruins glow faintly in the moonlight, their sharp edges softened by time. Between the tall saibas and strangler figs, shadows weave stories of kings and gods, of death and rebirth, of a world that never truly ended. In that stillness, the temple of the inscriptions rises like a frozen hymn. It has stood there for over a millennium, guarding what was once meant never to be seen again. Yet it was seen, rediscovered, reopened, remembered. The tomb beneath was breached not by plunderers, but by scholars with trembling hands and hearts full of wonder. And what they found was more than a burial. It was a message in stone, a story carved for eternity, and sealed beneath the weight of earth. When Alberto Ruz Lujille's team lowered their lamps into the chamber, they knew they were standing in the presence of something extraordinary. The air was heavy with the scent of limestone and centuries of silence. And when the sarcophagus lid was lifted, the light revealed Pakal, or what was left of him, surrounded by jewels, shells, and the gleaming fragments of his jade mask. It is said that Ruz paused, unable to speak for several moments. The air, he said, felt alive, as though the very walls exhaled when the mask was touched by light again. The jade face was pieced together later, in careful hands under modern light. When reassembled, it became the image of a man both serene and powerful, a monarch who seemed to understand the vast cycle of life and death more deeply than most. And yet questions began to rise, the kind that lingered like ghosts at the edges of archaeology. Who had crafted such perfection? Why was the tomb hidden so ingeniously? And why did the sarcophagus lid depict a scene so strange, so otherworldly, that some would call it impossible to explain through earthly eyes? You see, to the Maya, life was not a straight line. It was a circle, a spiral, an endless turning of the maize stalk, sun and soul. Pakal's tomb embodied this belief with mathematical precision. The temple above aligned with celestial events, solstices, equinoxes, even the rising of Venus. His burial was not random, nor symbolic. It was astronomical, cosmological. When sunlight pierced the upper temple on specific days of the year, it would descend through a narrow channel, an invisible shaft of light that struck the chamber where Pakal rested. For a brief moment, even in death, he would be illuminated by the sun itself. To stand there centuries later, and imagine that narrow beam of gold cutting through the dust in silence, it sends a shiver through the air. It is as though the Maya built a bridge not of stone, but of light. Pakal was meant to rise with the dawn. His jade mask was not simply to cover his face, it was to reflect the sun, to draw its essence, to merge the king's soul with that of the heavens. The reflective green of jade was a mirror for the gods. In their mythology, the world tree, the Siba, stretched from the underworld to the heavens. Its roots drank from the 9 levels of death. Its branches reached the 13 layers of paradise. Pakal's sarcophagus shows him poised upon that very tree, falling or ascending. It is impossible to tell. His body curves upward, as though being carried by a serpent's coils toward the stars. Archaeologists saw a myth. Others, however, saw something more peculiar, because when you look closely, and many have, the carvings on the sarcophagus appear almost mechanical. There are levers, wheels, shapes that seem deliberate, engineered. It was this strangeness that led to one of the most controversial interpretations of the modern era. In the 1970s, a few fringe theorists claimed the image was not of Pakal's soul ascending to the heavens, but of a man inside a machine. They called it the Maya astronaut. In this interpretation, Pakal is seen reclining in what looks like a vessel, his hands grasping levers, his feet pressing pedals, fire billowing beneath him. It was of course a modern projection, an echo of our fascination with technology reflected onto an ancient world. But even so, the resemblance was eerie. Most scholars dismiss the ancient astronaut theory as pseudoscience, pointing out that every symbol on the lid is well documented in Maya cosmology. The flames beneath him represent the underworld. The posture reflects rebirth, not flight. The supposed controls are stylized roots and vines of the world tree. And yet, even knowing that, one can't help but feel the haunting power of the image. It is the kind of ambiguity that makes Palenque eternal, the kind that reminds us that mystery itself has value, because even if Pakal was not a traveler of space, he was certainly a traveler of eternity. His tomb was built not just to hold him, but to send him somewhere. The air within the chamber, when first opened, was so perfectly sealed that it preserved not only his treasures, but faint traces of the pigments on the walls, reds and blues that once made the entire crypt glow like a painted sky. Imagine standing there, torch in hand, seeing the jade shimmer under flickering flame, the face of a king, reborn in green, watching you through obsidian eyes that had waited over 1,000 years. What would that silence feel like? It must have been the kind that presses against the skin, the kind that listens back. For the Maya, to speak the name of the dead was to keep them alive. By uncovering the tomb, Ruse and his team did not simply reveal history, they resurrected a soul. The mask, now resting far from the jungle in a temperature-controlled case, has lost none of its quiet power. Visitors describe a strange sensation when they stand before it, a feeling that it's not simply being observed, but observing. The soft glow of jade under the glass draws you in, and the longer you look, the more it feels like the mask's expression subtly changes. One moment calm, another moment faintly knowing. It's as though Pakal's gaze travels through centuries, unbroken. There is something profoundly human in that. The urge to endure, to be remembered, to defy the end by becoming part of the earth's eternal rhythm, and Jade of all things was perfect for that. It is almost indestructible, hard enough to outlast empires. The same mask that covered Pakal's face when his body turned to dust, still carries his image, perfect and unbroken. Perhaps that's what the Maya understood so well, that immortality was not about living forever, but being woven into the memory of stone, water, and sun. When archaeologists reconstructed the mask, they noticed something subtle. The placement of the tiles followed no perfect symmetry. Instead, there was an organic irregularity, a rhythm like breath. The craftsman must have known that life is not flawless. To make a perfect face would be to make one without soul. In those tiny variations lies the humanity of the object and the divine. Some fragments were missing, but even in those gaps the mask felt whole, as though absence itself was part of the design. There's a haunting kind of peace in that, the idea that even broken things can remain sacred, eternal. In recent years, scientists studying the mask have used advanced imaging to trace its mineral composition. The jade comes from distant quarries, in what is now Guatemala, hundreds of kilometers away. To carry such material through dense jungle, rivers, and mountains must have required immense devotion. This was no simple burial gift, it was an offering of kingdoms, and perhaps in the eyes of his people, a promise. Because Pakal's reign had been one of rebuilding, of restoring Palenque after years of turmoil. His city had suffered invasions and decline, but under his rule, art flourished, temples rose, and trade routes opened once more. He was seen as both king and restorer, a living embodiment of the maize god, who dies, is buried, and rises again with the harvest. His mask then was not just a face, it was a field reborn. Even in his death, Pakal nourished the land. The tomb itself, filled with offerings of jade, shell, and obsidian, was like a seed planted in the earth, meant to sprout light when the time was right. And in a way it did. When the tomb was rediscovered, it revived interest in Maya civilization. The story of Pakal brought new attention to Palenque, saving it from the slow decay of vines and rain. Today, thousands travel to see the temple, though few realize they're walking through what was once a city of tens of thousands, alive with music, firelight, and ritual. If you walk those paths now, you'll find the jungle has reclaimed most of it, but beneath every root and moss-covered stone lies a story waiting to be heard, and the mask, the one that slept for a millennium, remains the clearest whisper of all. It reminds us that time is not as linear as we think, that in the quiet persistence of things made by human hands, in jade, in stone, in memory, something of the maker remains. Perhaps that is the secret of the jade death mask. It was not meant only for Pakal. It was meant for anyone who would someday look into it, and remember that eternity is not found in gods or empires, but in the simple act of being remembered at all. Because in the end the jade does not fade, the light still finds the temple each dawn. The mask still waits, unchanged, and the king who became one with the sun continues to rise again and again in the endless green silence of Palenque. The Dresden Codex, deep in the quiet folds of time, when jungles had not yet reclaimed the ancient cities, and the night sky above Yucatan glowed with untouched brilliance, there was a civilization that saw the heavens as both map and mirror. The Maya watched the stars not merely for beauty, but for meaning. Every flicker, every wandering light above told a story about life below, and among their greatest surviving voices, silent yet speaking in symbols older than words, rests the Dresden Codex, one of the most mysterious books ever written by human hands. It sits today behind glass, its pages weathered by centuries, the bark paper fibers bearing the ink of another world. Yet if you look long enough, the pages seem to move, not because they truly do, but because they were never meant to stand still. They were written for the living sky, for the movement of Venus, for the turn of seasons and the counting of time that stretched both backward and forward, beyond what the human mind can hold. Imagine for a moment, a night in ancient Yucatan. A scribe sits cross-legged before a stone lamp, its flame steady, its smoke spiraling upward. Around him the soft hiss of cicadas in the trees. In his lap, stretched across smooth bark, is a page thin, light, and sacred. He dips a fine brush made from the hair of an animal tail into black ink mixed from soot and tree resin. Then, with absolute precision, he paints the symbols that will one day become part of a codex, a book that will survive fire, conquest, and centuries of silence. Each symbol he paints carries layers of meaning. They are not letters. Not exactly, they are visions, compressed worlds. Some stand for gods, some for dates, others for celestial events that will not occur for decades. But together they form something even greater, a record of how the Maya saw existence itself. The Dresden Codex, as we know it today, was once part of a larger collection. Dozens, perhaps hundreds of such books once existed, bound in jaguar skin, written in careful hieroglyphs on pages made from the inner bark of fig trees. They were stored in temples, studied by priests, and consulted for guidance, yet nearly all of them vanished, lost to time or destroyed in moments of tragic ignorance. When the Spanish arrived in the 16th century, they did not see sacred science or wisdom in the folded books they found. They saw superstition, and so they burned them. The fires rose in Yucatan, devouring the collected astronomy, mathematics and myth of an entire civilization. What survived did so by chance, hidden, carried away, or simply overlooked. The Dresden Codex was one of those few that slipped through time's grasp. Scholars believe it was taken to Europe sometime in the early colonial period, possibly as a curiosity, or as a gift, perhaps without the person carrying it even understanding what it was. For centuries it rested quietly in libraries, moved from one shelf to another, waiting for a world ready to read it again. When it was finally studied in earnest, it astonished everyone. Inside, painted in black, red and turquoise blue ink, were page after page of complex hieroglyphs and images, gods with curling serpent tails, celestial charts and endless numbers written in the unique base 20 system of the Maya. It was clear this was not a mythic storybook or a piece of mere decoration. It was a scientific manuscript, one of the most advanced of its age. It contained detailed astronomical tables, precise enough to predict solar and lunar eclipses, the movements of Venus, and even seasonal changes. The Maya had tracked Venus so carefully that their records aligned almost perfectly with modern data. The Codex did not treat Venus as a distant ball of rock and gas, of course, but as an entity alive with spiritual meaning, whose cycles marked the rhythm of time itself. For the Maya, Venus represented duality, life and death, war and peace, appearance and disappearance. Its rise before dawn signaled change, a renewal or a reckoning. The Dresden Codex mapped its path across the heavens with a precision that seems almost impossible for a civilization that lacked telescopes. But they didn't need glass to see. They had patience, and centuries of recorded observation, passed from one scribe to the next. The Codex's pages also spoke of rain, not in poetic form, but in ritual and calculation. One section, known to scholars as the Chac Rain Almanac, lists the days and ceremonies devoted to Chac, the rain god. Painted blue figures pour water from serpent jars, while glyphs below count the days and mark the festivals tied to planting and harvest. These were not guesses or simple prayers. They were part of a larger system, a calendar that united agriculture, astronomy, and faith. Even in silence, the Codex reveals how seamlessly the Maya wove science into spirituality. There was no boundary between the two. Every calculation was a prayer, every ritual was a way of measuring time. As your eyes follow the Inca trails across the pages, it's impossible not to feel a kind of reverence. The bark pages are folded accordion style, their surfaces coated in fine lime to make them smooth, their pigments still bright despite the centuries. Each line of color still seems to breathe faintly, as if the scribe's hand is not entirely gone. Some scholars believe the Dresden Codex was created in the post-classic period, between the 11th and 12th centuries, in one of the great Yucatan cities, perhaps Mayapan, or Chichen Itza. Others think it may have been copied from even older sources, the work of scribes preserving ancient knowledge before it disappeared forever. In that sense, the Codex is a bridge between the living and the lost, between memory and myth. One of its most haunting sections is what modern readers call the flood pages. These depict the gods pouring water over the earth in great torrents, with streams falling from serpent mouths, and the world submerged beneath them. Some interpret it as a mythic flood, others as a record of cyclical destruction, an echo of the Maya belief that worlds rise and fall in repeating ages. Yet the tone of the codex is not one of despair, it is rhythmic, cyclical, suggesting that destruction is never final, and that renewal always follows. The gods, after all, were not cruel but necessary. Each one had a role to play in the great clockwork of the cosmos. As the centuries passed, the codex waited. It crossed oceans, survived wars, and ended up in a library in Dresden, Germany, where it would one day lend its name. In 1945, during World War II, Dresden was bombed, and fire swept through the city. For a terrible moment, it seemed the codex would be lost again, but fate intervened. Though damaged by water, it survived the flames that consumed nearly everything around it. When it was restored, portions of its ink had blurred, and its once bright colors had dimmed. But the heart of it, the meaning, the structure, the numbers, remained intact. Even today, as conservators handle it with gloved care, you can still see the faint blue of the celestial figures, the red outlines of the gods, and the black symbols of time itself. It remains in every sense alive. What makes the Dresden Codex so haunting is not just what it contains, but what it implies. It is one of only 4 surviving Maya codices known to exist: the Dresden, the Madrid, the Paris, and the Grolier. Each one is a tiny fragment of an immense library that once documented an entire worldview. If 4 survived, what wonders lay within the hundreds that did not? We can only imagine books of medicine, of history, of trade, of the movements of Mars or Mercury, of poetry, or of prophecy. The Dresden Codex is a whisper from that vast chorus, reminding us of the depth and complexity of the minds that once walked the jungles of Yucatan. For those who read it today, it requires patience and humility. To truly see it, one must learn to think as the ancient scribes did, cyclically, symbolically, without dividing the sacred from the scientific. Each glyph is a doorway, each number, a rhythm. When you look at the pages, even through a glass display, you're not just seeing ink, you're seeing the memory of time itself, captured in patterns so precise they could chart the sky. The codex was a way to make sense of existence, to link the pulse of the heavens with the breath of human life. In a world that often moves too fast, there is something profoundly calming about it. The idea that the universe moves in repeating cycles, that the stars above and the rains below follow an eternal rhythm, it speaks to something deep and ancient in all of us. As the night deepens over Yucatan, and the stars rise once again in the same slow order they have for millennia, one might imagine the scribes still there, counting, painting, recording. Their light never truly went out. It simply folded itself into time, waiting to be read again. And the Dresden Codex, that delicate survivor, continues to whisper across the centuries. Its pages hold the memory of a people who could read the sky, predict eclipses, and understand time as both sacred and infinite. In its silence, it tells us that knowledge does not die, it only sleeps, waiting for eyes patient enough to see. The next time you look up at the stars and see Venus gleaming just before dawn, remember that the Maya once did the same, and in their careful hands, they wrote a book that still breathes the rhythm of the heavens. The Dresden Codex endures not because it was saved from fire, but because what it carries cannot be burned. The dream of understanding the universe, one page at a time. The Chacmool Statue, beneath the golden light of the Yucatan sun, when the air hums with heat and cicadas sing their endless chorus. The ancient stones of Chichen Itza still breathe. The wind moves softly through broken columns, carrying whispers from a world long vanished, a world that once pulsed with ceremony, power, and silence. Among these stones, in the shadow of the great temple of the warriors, lies one of the most enigmatic figures ever carved by human hands. He does not stand or kneel, but reclines, half sitting, half resting, his head turned to the side, his gaze caught between the heavens and the earth. Upon his stomach rests a shallow bowl, forever waiting. He is known as the Chacmool, and though he has lain in quiet for nearly 1,000 years, his posture still suggests a kind of watchfulness, as if he guards a secret that the centuries cannot erase. The Chacmool statues are not unique to Chichen Itza. They appear in temples scattered across Mesoamerica, in Tula, in Michoacan, and across the heartlands of the ancient Maya and Toltec worlds. But the one here in the Temple of the Warriors is perhaps the most famous and the most haunting. It sits at the edge of the Great Pyramid stairway, facing outward, watching the plaza below, the place where the living once gathered in vast numbers, their chants rising into the humid air. To stand before him today is to feel a quiet unease. His face is human, yet not quite stylized, abstract, detached from time. His limbs are heavy but graceful, his torso slightly twisted, as though caught mid-motion. The shallow dish he holds seems to demand attention, though it has long been empty. Scholars have debated for generations what these figures truly represent. Were they messengers between gods and mortals? Were they offerings themselves, or guardians of the threshold between life and death, heaven and earth? The name Chacmool itself is not ancient. It was given much later, in the late 19th century, when an explorer named Augustus Le Plongeon excavated one of these statues near Chichen Itza. He claimed, perhaps wrongly, that it represented a fallen warrior named Chacmool, a name he himself invented from Mayan words. Though his theories were fanciful, the name stuck, and so the reclining figure of the ancient world was forever known by a word born of misunderstanding. Still, there's something fitting about that, because the Chacmool seems to exist precisely at the intersection of understanding and mystery. If you close your eyes and imagine Chichen Itza at its height, around the 11th century, you can almost see the world he once looked upon, the plaza below, alive with people, merchants, nobles, farmers, children, the air thick with the scent of burning copal resin, the steady rhythm of drums echoing across the courtyard, feathered dancers moving in circles around fire pits, the distant hum of conch shells, and high above them all, the Temple of the Warriors, gleaming with fresh paint and mosaic tiles, its walls alive with carvings of jaguars, serpents, and eagles. It was a place of both worship and fear, a center of cosmic balance. The Maya believed that every offering, every ritual, helped keep the universe in motion. To neglect the gods was to invite chaos, drought, disease, collapse. And so rituals here were not symbolic. They were vital acts of sustenance. The Chacmool was part of that system. The shallow dish upon his chest was not decorative, it was functional. It was meant to receive offerings, sometimes food, sometimes flowers, sometimes obsidian or jade, and on solemn occasions blood. Human sacrifice in the Maya world was complex, not an act of cruelty, but of belief. Life was seen as cyclical, and sacrifice as a renewal, a way of feeding the gods who in turn sustained the world. The Chacmool's bowl may have caught offerings of liquid or fire, of maize or heart. In ritual, priests would lay their gifts upon the stone surface, believing that the reclining figure served as an intermediary, a sacred messenger who carried the offering to the divine. And what a messenger he was! To create a Chacmool was to sculpt a human form frozen in a paradox, at rest, yet alert. His posture is neither reclining nor sitting, neither alive nor dead. His eyes look aside, not upward, as if aware of something others cannot see. He is a watcher at the edge of both worlds. The artisans who carved him worked with reverence. The limestone used at Chichen Itza was quarried nearby, heavy and porous, difficult to shape. Yet their tools made of obsidian, flint, and copper managed to bring forth grace from stubborn stone. The figure's face, though stylized, carries an expression of quiet concentration, as though listening. In the flickering torchlight of the temple, he would have seemed almost alive. The Temple of the Warriors itself, where he rests, is a marvel of architecture and symbolism. Its broad stairway is lined with serpent columns, its platform surrounded by hundreds of stone pillars carved in relief. Warriors, captives, and gods mingled together in scenes of both triumph and offering. The temple's walls once shone with color, and at its summit stood the sanctuary, the inner chamber where rituals were performed. To climb those steps in the time of the ancients was to ascend toward the divine. The air grew still, the world below faded into murmurs, and before the temple's entrance, the Chacmool waited, poised between the human and the celestial. What did the priests think as they approached him? Did they whisper prayers before laying their offerings? Did they feel the weight of his gaze, carved eyes unblinking even in the dim light? Perhaps they believed, as many did, that he embodied the spirit of the sacrificed warrior, one who had given his life to feed the gods, now immortalized as a bridge between realms. To lay offerings upon him was to honor the eternal warrior, who carried humanity's devotion into the unseen. There is a subtle detail, often overlooked, the way his head turns slightly to one side. It is not random. In nearly all known Chacmools, the head is turned, never facing forward. Some scholars think this represents his role as a communicator, someone who looks aside toward the divine, rather than directly at mortals. Others see it as symbolic of vigilance, a figure always watching, always listening, from the corner of the eye. There are Chacmools carved from stone, from basalt, from volcanic rock. Some appear youthful, others aged. Some hold bowls, others trays, or even carved discs, but all share that same uncanny posture, reclining, tense, waiting. At Chichen Itza, the one who rests at the Temple of the Warriors seems almost at peace. The sun crosses him daily, casting long shadows across his face and chest. Rainwater gathers briefly in his dish before evaporating. Moss and lichen creep into the creases of his carved form, yet still he endures, as though guarding the temple even in ruin. His survival is remarkable. So many of his kind have been lost, destroyed, or buried beneath shifting soil. But the Chacmool of Chichen Itza has remained in place, century after century, witnessing empires rise and fall. Explorers arrive and depart, and the jungle return to reclaim its domain. When the city was rediscovered in the 19th century, travelers were struck by his presence. Even surrounded by decay and silence, the statue seemed alive. Writers describe feeling watched, not with malice, but with solemn patience, as though the Chacmool knew more than he could say. Over time, archaeologists came to understand that Chacmool figures were part of a larger ritual system that connected human offerings to cosmic cycles, particularly to the sun, rain, and Venus. Offerings laid upon them were not isolated acts, but timed with astronomical events, the equinoxes, the appearances of Venus, or the rain's return. The Chacmool, then, was not simply a figure of death, but a keeper of balance. His body symbolized the human bridge between the physical and the divine, his bowl the threshold between giving and receiving. If you visit Chichen Itza at dawn, when the tourists have not yet arrived and the mist still lingers among the columns, you can feel the stillness he commands. The Temple of the Warriors glows faintly under the rising sun, and there he is, reclining unchanging. The jungle murmurs softly around him, a bird calls from the shadows. It feels for a moment as if the ancient rituals could begin again at any time. Archaeologists found traces of pigment on his surface, faint reds and blues, remnants of what was once vibrant paint. He was never meant to be gray stone. In his prime he would have been radiant, his face perhaps red with life, his bowl gleaming, his form outlined in deep blues. The Mayans loved color, for they saw it as sacred, alive with meaning. To them, red was not simply red. It was blood, the east, the dawn. Blue was not just the sky, but the waters of life, the essence of renewal. Even the stone itself carried meaning. Limestone for endurance, obsidian for vision. Standing before him, it's easy to see how belief could transform stone into spirit. The Chacmool's stillness invites reflection. In him time collapses. The rituals may have ceased, the language changed, the city fallen silent, but the posture remains, the offering remains, the gaze remains. He teaches, without words, that devotion can take many forms, a carving, a gesture, a moment of pause between breaths. Even today, he holds that posture of quiet vigilance, an eternal intermediary between what is offered and what is received. The bowl may now hold only rainwater and fallen leaves, but symbolically, it still waits, it still invites. The Chacmool reminds us that the ancients did not separate art from purpose, or beauty from belief. To carve such a figure was an act of prayer, to give shape to the invisible, to make the bridge between the mortal and the eternal visible in stone. Every groove of his surface carries that intention. Every curve of his arm or tilt of his head is deliberate, part of a cosmic design that spoke not just to gods, but to the rhythm of the earth itself. He lies now beneath the open sky, weathered but unbroken. The rain that falls upon him is the same rain his creators once prayed for. The stars above him trace the same paths the Maya once charted in their codices, and though his world has changed beyond recognition, his purpose remains, to receive, to connect, to remind. At night when the tourists have gone and the jungle swallows the sound of the world, the moonlight touches his face, the air cools, the stones of Chichen Itza breathe, and in that deep silence, you can almost sense it, the faint pulse of something ancient and enduring. Perhaps he does not guard the temple at all. Perhaps he guards the memory of balance, of a time when humans believed that every gift mattered, that the act of giving itself sustained the world. The Chacmool endures not because he is stone, but because the belief that shaped him still stirs in us, the quiet understanding that we are part of something greater, that between earth and sky there must always be offering, reverence, and connection. He is not simply reclining, he is waiting, watching, holding the line between the living and the divine, forever caught between breath and eternity. The Caracol Observatory, high above the ancient plaza of Chichen Itza, where shadows stretch across the limestone and the air hums with cicadas, there rises a tower unlike any other in Mesoamerica. Circular, layered, and worn by centuries of rain and wind, it does not seek to touch the heavens, but to understand them. Locals call it El Caracol, the snail, named for the spiral staircase that winds within its weathered core. But to the ancient Maya, it was something far greater, a bridge between the earth and the sky, between the world of men and the great precise rhythms of the cosmos. It stands upon a broad platform, surrounded by stone terraces and broken columns. From afar it looks almost like an ancient lighthouse adrift in a sea of green, the jungle pressing at its edges, the ruins of temples and palaces lying silent all around. Yet even now, if you look closely at its windows and walls, you will see purpose in every angle. Each opening, each alignment, seems to speak the language of the stars. The Maya built this structure over 1,000 years ago, between the 9th and 10th centuries, at the height of Chichen Itza's power. While empires rose and fell elsewhere in the world, here deep in the Yucatan Peninsula, the Maya watched the skies. They mapped the movements of Venus, the moon, the sun, and the stars, not for idle curiosity, but because to them, the heavens were alive. Every celestial motion was a message, every alignment a conversation between gods and mortals. The Caracol was their instrument, part observatory, part temple, part timekeeper. Its spiral tower once rose higher than it does today, and from its summit priests could observe the dance of light across the horizon. At dawn and dusk, the sun's rays would slip through its carefully placed windows, illuminating inner chambers in moments of dazzling symmetry. When Venus appeared, bright and sharp in the morning sky, the priests would mark its path with silent reverence. They believed that Venus was the celestial twin of the god Kukulkan, the feathered serpent, a being of light and rebirth, who descended from the heavens to bless the earth. Every cycle of Venus mattered. Every rising and setting foretold the timing of rituals, the sowing of maize, and even the outcomes of wars. To misread the sky was to misstep in the cosmic order, and so they built a tower to ensure they never did. Inside the Caracol, the air grows cooler. The spiral stair, narrow and uneven, winds upward through stone so thick it muffles the outside world. Imagine it centuries ago, torches flickering, their smoke curling against the curved walls, the faint scent of copal resin, burning in small clay vessels, priests, draped in feathered robes, ascending slowly with painted faces, carrying offerings of maize, jade, and incense to the upper chamber. At the summit, the chamber opens to the sky through narrow slits and circular holes. From here one could see the horizon in all directions, the low forest canopy, the distant temples, the fading line where earth met sky. When the sun rose on certain days of the year, the solstices and equinoxes, its light would pass directly through the openings, marking time with beams of fire. For the Maya, this was not mere architecture. It was a calendar carved in stone. Each alignment told them something: the lengthening of days, the return of the rains, the moment when Venus vanished or reappeared after its long absence from the night. And as the light shifted through the tower, so too did their rituals. The people below would gather in the plazas, awaiting the signal from above. The fire kindled at dawn, the conch shell's call echoing through the city, the start of another sacred cycle. They were not wrong in their observations. Modern astronomers who studied the Caracol discovered that many of its windows and sightlines match exactly with key astronomical events: Venus's extreme positions, the solstices, and even lunar standstills. It is in every sense a true observatory, though built with no metal instruments, no glass lenses, no written equations, only faith, observation, and patience. To watch the heavens from this tower would have been a deeply spiritual act. The Maya believed that the cosmos was layered: 13 heavens above, 9 underworlds below, and the earth in between. The sky was not distant, it was alive with beings, deities, and stories. The stars were ancestors, the planets gods, the Milky Way, a celestial river. When they watched Venus, they watched Kukulkan himself, the god who descended to bring life and ascended to bring light. Each appearance of that bright planet in the morning or evening sky was read as an omen, the beginning of new cycles of creation and destruction. Within the Caracol, the astronomer priests became translators of divine time. They observed in silence, recording what they saw in codices of bark paper and painted glyphs. Their observations guided farmers and kings alike, shaping not only the seasons but the rhythm of human life. At night the observatory would glow faintly with torchlight, its spiral chambers echoing with the low chants of prayer. Outside the jungle would fall silent, the stars emerging one by one above, and through those narrow openings the watchers of the sky would trace the slow turning of constellations: the serpent, the turtle, the scorpion, each one holding a story in the cosmic fabric. Time moved differently here, not as a straight line, but as a circle, as endless and intricate as the spiral within the tower. Over centuries, as Chichen Itza began to fade, the Caracol remained. The jungle crept closer, the plaster peeled, the upper levels crumbled, the windows darkened, but still, its purpose lingered. Even in ruin, the alignments endure. The sun still finds its way through the ancient openings, as if unwilling to let the dialogue between sky and stone end. Archaeologists who first studied the site in the 19th century were puzzled. It was unlike any other Maya structure, round instead of rectangular, curving where others were angular. Some speculated it was a later construction, perhaps influenced by other cultures, but as excavation continued, it became clear. This was pure Maya ingenuity, an evolution of architectural skill, guided by cosmic necessity. The Caracol's shape is not just beautiful, it is functional. The spiral form mirrors the movement of celestial bodies, the cycle of the seasons, the turning of the stars. It is both a map and a metaphor, expressing in stone what the Maya understood with intuition: that all things move in circles. Imagine standing there 1,000 years ago, atop the tower at dusk. The sun dips below the horizon, the air cools, and Venus emerges, a spark in the fading light. You hold a piece of polished obsidian to the sky, using its dark reflection to track the bright point's motion. Beside you, your fellow priests murmur calculations, marking the days in their codices. You sense the presence of Kukulkan, the feathered serpent, gliding unseen through the sky. The city below grows quiet. The marketplace is empty. The games have ended. The fires burn low. The tower remains, the link between heaven and earth unbroken. Even now, as centuries have passed, the Caracol retains a strange stillness. Tourists climb its worn steps, unaware that their path follows one once walked by astronomer priests. They peer through the same openings, see the same horizon, feel the same humid air. The stars above them are unchanged, their light traveling across the same infinite gulf. Time has not diminished its power. If anything, it has made it greater. A reminder that long before telescopes and satellites, humans were already reading the sky, already seeking to understand their place within it. The Caracol story is not only one of science, but of faith. Faith that the universe has rhythm, that the heavens move with purpose, and that understanding those movements can bring harmony to life on Earth. Even its name, El Caracol, feels symbolic. The snail, the spiral, the infinite loop. It evokes the shape of galaxies, the curl of shells, the pattern of hurricanes, the unfurling of fern fronds. Nature itself speaks in spirals, and the Maya perhaps saw in that pattern the language of creation. When the rains come to the Yucatan, and thunder rolls across the sky, the observatory stands silent, the wind threading through its ancient corridors. The same storms that once filled its cisterns and carved its stones still pass overhead. Lightning flashes, illuminating the broken walls. For an instant the tower looks whole again, alive again. Its watchers return to their posts, and when the rain ends, the stars return, clear and brilliant. The Caracol remains what it always was, a witness. It has seen the rise of empires, the silence of abandonment, the rediscovery by modern eyes. It has stood through centuries of sun and rain, its spiral unbroken, its purpose unchanged. It whispers that time, like the heavens, never truly stops, it only turns. So if you ever stand before it, let your eyes follow the same path the Maya once traced. Watch the horizon where the sun sets in perfect alignment with the stone. Wait for the stars to emerge, and think of the generations who watched them before you. Their ink-stained hands, their whispered prayers, their hearts filled with wonder at the endless sky. The Caracol is not a ruin. It is a reminder that even the ancients, surrounded by jungle and silence, knew how to read the language of eternity written in the stars, and in that language across time and stone, they left us a message, that we are not apart from the cosmos. We are part of its rhythm, its turning, its endless spiral. The Bonampak Murals. Deep in the heart of the Lacandon jungle, where mist clings to the ancient ceiba trees, and howler monkeys call like distant thunder, lies Bonampak, a name that means painted walls. At first glance it might seem like just another Maya ruin swallowed by the forest. Stone steps cracked by roots, lichen spreading like slow fire across carved glyphs. But step closer, and you'll find something that no other sight on Earth quite captures. Color. Vivid, defiant color that somehow survived 1,000 years of rain and silence. Within the temple of the murals, light falls gently through narrow doorways, catching the reds, blues, and yellows that still cling to plaster. Time has dimmed them, yes, but they pulse faintly like old embers refusing to go cold. The murals of Bonampak are not still images. They are a story unfolding across 3 chambers, each one alive with movement, music, fear, and power. The Maya who painted them left behind more than pictures. They left their breath, their heartbeat, the echo of drums that once shook these walls. When archaeologists first entered the temple in 1946, guided by the Lacandon people, they were stunned. For decades, scholars had thought the ancient Maya were peaceful stargazers, gentle builders of pyramids and calendars. But Bonampak shattered that illusion. Its murals screamed of something else, of conquest, of blood, of ceremony and song. In one chamber, dancers whirl in feathered costumes, their hands raised to the sky. In another, nobles sit on jaguar thrones as captives kneel before them. And in the final room, warriors drag prisoners by the hair, their faces frozen in terror, their eyes painted wide with despair. It is brutal, it is human, and it is beautiful. The murals stretch like a movie across the plaster, each figure, each motion painted with astonishing detail. You can see the folds of cotton robes, the flicker of torches, even the painted tears of the defeated. The Maya artists worked with pigments made from ground minerals, hematite for red, malachite for green, indigo for blue. They painted layer upon layer, on still damp plaster, binding color and story together. In the dim interior, these hues would have danced in torchlight, making the scenes feel alive. Yet there's something more haunting about Bonampak than just its artistry. It's the sense that these walls were never meant to survive so long. The murals were not carved into stone. They were meant for eyes that would understand their message. They speak of a ruler, Chacmool II, who sought to immortalize his reign through triumph and spectacle. The central chamber shows his greatest victory, a captured enemy's humiliation beneath his feet. But when you look closely, beyond the painted glory, you see uncertainty too. The ruler's face is stern, but his hands tremble. The captives bleed, but the victors do not look at them. They look at something else, something above. Perhaps they knew that no triumph lasts forever. Outside, the jungle presses in again. Vines creep across carved lintels. The cries of toucans echo in the distance. And yet within the narrow rooms, the air feels different, heavier, charged. If you stand very still, you might hear it, the faint sound of a conch shell horn, the rhythm of painted drums, a ceremony playing again in silence. The Bonampak murals are rare. not because they are old, but because they are honest. Most monuments show what rulers wanted to be remembered for: power, piety, perfection. But these murals show what it cost. Every stroke, every crimson handprint tells of human struggle, of men and women who knew that art could make their world last just a little longer. Some archaeologists believe the murals were created during a single event, a grand victory celebration in 791 CE, but others whisper that the paintings carry deeper layers of meaning. Beneath the surface story of war and ceremony lies the story of cosmic balance, of how life and death, order and chaos, must remain in harmony. Even the blood painted on the walls might not just be violence, but offering the essence that nourished the gods. Over centuries, rainwater seeped through cracks, washing away fragments of paint, yet somehow the murals endure like dreams refusing to fade. Bonampak was eventually abandoned, swallowed by the forest. Trees grew through temples, birds nested in what had once been royal chambers. For centuries, no human eyes saw the murals again. When they were rediscovered, the air in those rooms hadn't been disturbed in over 1,000 years. The pigments were so vibrant that archaeologists thought they were newly painted. Within weeks, exposure to air began to dull them. That's the tragedy of discovery. To reveal something so ancient is also to awaken its slow decay. Now only a handful of people are allowed inside at a time. The humidity is controlled. Flash photography is forbidden. The murals are both alive and fragile, a breath away from vanishing, but through them the Maya still whisper, of gods who demanded beauty, of rulers who feared being forgotten, of artists who painted life itself onto stone. If you could step closer, close enough to see the brushstrokes, you'd notice the humanity in each line, the careful curve of a dancer's wrist, the frightened eyes of a captive, the painted blood that looks too fresh. Each figure is both mortal and divine, the same paradox that defined Maya civilization. Outside, the jungle hums again. The walls fade back into shadow, and time resumes its quiet reign. But you can't help wondering, if the forest fell silent again, if the light dimmed to nothing, would the drums begin to beat once more inside that temple? Perhaps the Bonampak murals do more than remember sound. Perhaps they are sound, the echo of an ancient heartbeat, still pulsing through plaster, waiting for anyone who dares to listen. The air inside the temple of the murals has a thickness to it, as though time itself hasn't moved. Each breath seems to carry traces of incense and lime dust, mingling with the scent of wet stone. When the archaeologists first returned in the mid-20th century, the walls seemed alive. They had stepped into a room where an ancient celebration had only just ended, and for a fleeting moment, they weren't visitors, they were witnesses, standing among the Maya once more. Imagine it, torchlight flickering across the painted walls, the drumming echoing off stone, and the murmur of hundreds of voices outside. In that moment, the murals weren't decoration, they were a declaration. A living story, preserved not in text, but in pigment and plaster. The story the walls tell unfolds like an ancient play. In the first chamber, musicians and dancers move in rhythm, men in jaguar skins, feathers rising from headdresses, the low hum of conch horns filling the air. The ruler Chacmool II sits enthroned, surrounded by his court. There's joy here, the calm before the storm. The second chamber explodes into motion. Warriors clash, captives are taken, and the air vibrates with chaos. You can almost hear the sharp rhythm of obsidian blades, the cries of battle echoing beyond the walls. Then, in the third chamber, silence, the aftermath. The captives kneel, hands bound as priests prepare them for ritual. The ruler watches, the gods are watching too. The walls close in with the weight of divine presence. Blood flows not as cruelty, but as offering. Life given to sustain the balance of worlds, sky, earth, and underworld. Archaeologists later realized that this sequence wasn't just about war or victory. It was about legitimacy, a ruler proving his right to reign, not only through conquest, but through devotion to the gods. The murals are a contract written in color and sacrifice. Chacmool II stands as both king and servant, triumphant and humbled before forces greater than himself. Outside the temple, the world continued. The forest grew thicker and Bonampak slowly disappeared beneath its weight. By the time explorers rediscovered it, centuries of silence had passed. The Lacandon Maya, descendants of those who once painted the walls, guided outsiders there only with caution. They called the ruins Bonampak, the place of painted walls, and they knew what slept within. When the temple was opened, modern light touched the pigments for the first time in 1,000 years. The reds were still fierce, the blues impossibly vivid, the sacred Maya blue, made from indigo and clay, resistant to time and weather. For a moment it was as though the past had been waiting patiently behind a curtain of leaves, but the act of seeing comes with a cost. Exposure to air began to fade the pigments. Each photograph, each flashlight beam, stole a little more of the story. In the decades that followed, preservationists worked desperately to protect what remained. They built barriers, installed filters, and limited access. Even so, the murals changed, the colors dulled, cracks deepened. What had once shouted across centuries now whispered, yet even faded. They speak volumes. The details scholars uncovered transformed our understanding of Maya civilization. These people weren't passive astronomers gazing quietly at the stars. They were poets and warriors, priests and painters, a culture alive with art, politics and ritual precision. Bonampak forced historians to see the Maya not as a vanished mystery, but as a people of complexity and contradiction, capable of both immense beauty and terrible violence. In one corner of the third chamber, a figure kneels, not a warrior, not a ruler, but an artist. He's shown with brushes and pigments, working on the very murals you see, a signature, of sorts. The Maya painter immortalized himself in the act of creation. It's a breathtaking human detail. Across 1,000 years, artist and observer share a single gaze. Even today, the pigments used at Bonampak remain a mystery. The Maya blue, for instance, has fascinated chemists for decades. Unlike any other ancient pigment, it resists humidity, heat, and decay. Some believe the formula was lost deliberately, a sacred secret meant only for temple walls. Others think it was simply forgotten, as civilization after civilization collapsed, leaving the forest to reclaim what was once sacred. Bonampak was not a great city like Tikal or Palenque. It was small, almost modest, but it had power, cultural, spiritual power, born from its alliance with Yaxchilan. The murals record a political triumph, yes, but they also preserve a spiritual worldview. Every scene, every motion was meant to mirror the cosmic order. Above and below the visible world, gods danced and battled just as humans did here on Earth. To paint was to speak to them. Perhaps that's why the murals survived at all. Perhaps the gods themselves remembered them. Today the jungle presses close once more. Thick vines wrap around the temple walls. Roots split stone. Visitors must tread carefully, their footsteps soft on the moss-covered paths. Inside the temple, the air is cool, almost reverent. You can still see traces of faces, the wide eyes of a warrior, the curved lips of a dancer, the painted blood of a captive. Each stroke is a heartbeat frozen in time, and when you stand there, with only the rustle of leaves and the hum of insects outside, something remarkable happens. The silence begins to move. It hums faintly, like distant drumming, or maybe that's just your pulse, syncing with the rhythm left behind by those who painted the walls. Bonampak reminds us that sound doesn't only travel through air. It can live in color, in memory, in the vibration of stories that refuse to die. The murals are more than paintings. They are a time machine, a recording of voices too ancient to hear yet too human to forget. Some say that on the quietest nights, when the jungle is perfectly still, you can almost see the torches flicker again in that narrow chamber. The dancers move, the drums return, the painted eyes blink, and for a moment, time folds back on itself, and the walls breathe once more, remembering, retelling, and waiting for those who still listen. Because in Bonampak, the past never ended. It only sleeps, painted in color, just beneath the surface of silence. The ball court marker of Copán. In the heart of the ancient Maya city of Copán, there is a stone circle half buried in the courtyard of a grand, echoing ruin. It doesn't look like much at first, a circular carving of stone set into the floor of a long sloping court, but it marks the center of one of the most sacred games ever played, a game where the rules were written not by men, but by gods. And this marker, worn by centuries of footsteps, rain and silence, once divided two worlds, life and death, heaven and the underworld. When archaeologists uncovered the great ball court of Copán, they realized it wasn't built for recreation. It was a temple, a sacred stage where the Maya reenacted the cosmic battles of creation itself. The marker at its center wasn't just a boundary, it was a portal, a symbolic axis between the living and the divine. The ancient Maya believed that the world began through sacrifice and struggle. The hero twins, as told in the Popol Vuh, descended into the underworld, Xibalba, to challenge its lords through the ballgame. They played with the forces of death, tricked them, and through their triumph light and life returned to the world. The Copán marker, like those found in other cities, was a physical echo of that myth, a reminder that every match, every movement, was a recreation of the god's own contest. Under the blazing sun of the Yucatan, the players would step onto the court wearing belts of leather and stone, their bodies glistening with sweat and paint. The air would thrum with anticipation. A solid rubber ball, heavy and unyielding, would bounce between them, struck only with hips, forearms or thighs. Each impact resounded like thunder against the stone walls, echoing across the plaza. The game was brutal, demanding precision, rhythm and endurance, but it was more than sport. It was prayer through motion. The ball court marker of Copán is intricately carved, depicting two opposing figures, each representing one side of the cosmic struggle. One wears the headdress of a serpent, a symbol of rebirth and transition. The other bears the regalia of death. Between them lies the ball itself, shown as a skull or a sun disk, depending on the interpretation. The message is unmistakable. Every game played here was a reflection of the struggle that keeps the universe alive. At sunset, the slanted walls of the court glow a deep amber, In those moments, it's easy to imagine the spectators, nobles, priests, and citizens gathered around, their murmurs rising and falling with the rhythm of the match. To win or lose here wasn't simply about pride. Some games were played to decide wars, to seal alliances, or to appease the gods. Sometimes it was the captain of the winning team who was sacrificed, a paradoxical honor, for he was believed to ascend directly into the afterlife, carrying the prayers of his people. When the ball struck the marker, the impact was more than physical. It symbolized the connection between worlds, the moment when the sun itself touched the earth, when the boundaries blurred between gods and men. The court became a living calendar, aligned with celestial events. The shadows it cast during solstices and equinoxes told time as surely as any clock. Every bounce of the ball mirrored the arc of the sun across the sky, and every victory echoed the triumph of life over death. Archaeologists studying the Copán marker found traces of red pigment along its carvings. Red, the color of blood, of sacrifice, of divine energy. They realized that this wasn't just a game marker, it was an altar. Blood would have been offered here, perhaps at the start or end of the match, as a symbolic act of renewal. To the Maya, blood wasn't something to fear, it was the essence of life, a gift returned to the gods who created it. At night, under a sky untouched by modern light, the ball court would transform. The Milky Way, bright and sprawling, was believed to be the celestial version of the ball court, a pathway for souls, a place where gods continued their eternal contest. The marker, glinting faintly in the moonlight, became the reflection of that heavenly battleground. The players were not just men, they were avatars, reliving the myth written in the stars. Centuries later, when the jungle began to reclaim Copán, the marker remained where it had always been. The walls of the court cracked and tilted under the pressure of roots, but the circle of stone held firm. It waited patiently beneath the leaves and soil, its carvings softened but not erased. When modern explorers found it again, they were struck by the precision of its placement, the geometry of belief preserved in stone. Today the ball court of Copán stands silent. The birds and insects sing where once the crowd chanted and the rubber ball thudded against limestone. Visitors walk its length slowly, whispering as though afraid to disturb something sacred. When they reach the center, they find the marker still aligned perfectly, still staring upward toward the heavens. Some touch it gently, tracing the faint outlines of the figures, the circle where gods once played. And in that moment, the quiet of the court seems to breathe. The air thickens, the sunlight bends, and for a heartbeat, you can almost hear the sound of the ball, a single resonant strike echoing through time. Because the Maya never built for their present alone, they built for eternity, for cycles, for renewal, for the rhythm of life that never truly ends. The marker remains a reminder of that rhythm, a heartbeat carved in stone, and perhaps if you stand long enough, you'll feel it too. The pulse of a civilization that believed the universe itself was a game, and every victory a prayer to keep the world turning. When night descended upon Copán, the ball court did not fall silent. The shadows of the massive staircases and serpent carvings stretched across the plaza, and the marker, that circular stone, perfectly centered in the court, caught the moonlight like an open eye. To the Maya, this was not an ordinary night. It was the time when the court below and the sky above became mirrors of each other. The Milky Way arched overhead, known to them as the White Road of Souls. It was said that when the gods played their celestial ball game, the stars themselves were their spectators. The priests of Copán would emerge after dusk, wrapped in woven mantles heavy with shells, feathers, and jade. They would carry torches and conch trumpets, their light flickering against the worn carvings of jaguars, serpents, and gods that lined the walls. The marker at the center would gleam faintly, glistening from the libations of water, honey, and sometimes blood that were poured onto it before the rituals began. The night air carried a low hum, chants that had been whispered for generations, a language between men and gods. In their cosmology, the ball game wasn't just recreation, it was cosmic maintenance. The marker symbolized the sun, as it passed through the underworld each night, reborn every morning at dawn. Each match was a miniature reenactment of that cycle, of life's descent into darkness, and its victorious return to light. The players, chosen through ritual and lineage, bore the weight of this mythology. When they stepped onto the court, they ceased being mortals. They became embodiments of cosmic order. At Copán, the alignment of the ball court is no coincidence. Archaeologists have discovered that it aligns with celestial events, the solstices, the equinoxes, and the path of Venus, the planet most sacred to the Maya. During certain times of the year, sunlight would stream across the marker in a perfect line, striking the serpent carvings on the opposite wall. To the priests watching, this was a sign that the gods had accepted the offerings, that the game had once again ensured the balance between sky and earth. In the deeper recesses of Copán's temples, murals depict the ball game, not as sport, but as divine theater. Some show decapitated players, from whose necks sprout serpents or streams of maize, the symbol of fertility and life. It was believed that sacrifice, especially voluntary sacrifice, did not end a life but transformed it. The blood that touched the marker became a bridge between worlds, nourishing the gods as surely as rain nourished crops. The Maya saw no tragedy in this, only continuity. Imagine a match played under torchlight. The thud of the ball made from pure rubber, astonishingly crafted centuries before anyone else in the world had perfected the material, echoes through the night. The players' shadows twist and leap against the limestone walls. The crowd chants softly, rhythmic, hypnotic. Every strike, every bounce, is watched by both the living and the dead. Somewhere beyond the court, the high priest stands beside the marker, reading omens in the movements of the game. If the ball passes over a certain line or strikes the center, it is seen as a prophecy, a message from the gods themselves. Over time, each ball court became layered with meaning, memories, and myth. Copán's court was built, destroyed, and rebuilt several times, each new structure incorporating fragments of the old, as if the Maya refused to let their past be erased. The marker itself was sometimes recarved, its designs refreshed, but its position never moved. It remained at the axis of the sacred geometry, the immovable heart of the ritual, and when the civilization of Copán eventually fell silent, its rulers vanished, its plazas overgrown, the marker endured. Buried under centuries of soil, it waited. When archaeologists uncovered it in the 20th century, they found not just a relic of sport, but a monument of philosophy. The court's acoustics still work. A single hand clap sends echoes bouncing in rhythmic pulses, as though the ancient chants never really stopped. The marker still lies perfectly centered, defying time, erosion, and neglect. Today, visitors to Copán often speak of an uncanny feeling when they stand in that court, a sense that the place remembers. Some describe it as a heaviness in the air, others as a quiet vibration beneath their feet. The Maya might have said it was the heartbeat of the gods, pulsing through the stone, reminding us that the universe is still in motion, and that even silence can hold memory. If you close your eyes and let your hand rest on that ancient circle, you might feel more than just cool stone. You might sense the echo of centuries of hands before yours, the rhythm of games played for the cosmos, the prayers whispered in the dust. You might feel just faintly the pulse of the eternal match, still being played, somewhere between heaven and the underworld, between the stars and the earth, because in Copán, the gods did not merely watch, they played, they lost and won, bled and were reborn. The ball court was their temple, and the marker, still there, still waiting, is their footprint in the world, a circle unbroken. Beneath the overgrown temples and fading carvings, the voices of the Maya still echo. Each artifact reminds us that time may erase empires, but never their stories. Thank you for joining us on this journey through ancient wonder and quiet mystery. Until next time, sleep well, and keep listening to the whispers of unearthed secrets.